Welcome to Startup Canada Live's Startup Foundations. Today is Thursday, February 9th, and I'm Brandon Walzenuk. I do product and venture with the venture capital firm Co-Venture out of New York City. And I'm working with Startup Canada to basically help move Canadian businesses forward and then hopefully find one to invest in. Startup Canada is the national rallying community and voice for Canada's entrepreneurship community.
Hi everybody, I'm Janice McDonald. I'm an entrepreneur, president of the Beacon Agency and co-founder of thisSpaceworks.com. And Brandon and I, we are your hosts for today. We are here live at the Startup Canada national offices in Ottawa, Ontario, and we're broadcasting from cubicles, co-working spaces, incubators, and startup communities right across Canada.
Every Thursday on Startup Canada Live, we discuss topics relevant to Canada's startup, scale-up, and small business community. We feature expert guests to provide insights into funding, growing, and scaling successful ventures. Startup Canada Live is streamed through Periscope, Facebook Live, and EventStream for easy viewing wherever you are via our good friends at restream.io. Startup Canada Live is brought to you by Intuit QuickBooks, Canada's leading provider of business, financial, and tax management solutions for small, medium enterprises, and by Mastercard. Whether you need a card for purchases or you need payment solutions to help you better manage and track expenses, Mastercard has the right solution for your small business. No, I'm not being paid for this. Shout out to Tristan Interactive next door for sharing their internet line with us today because we live in Canada and internet
Can be challenging.
Right.
So today's Startup Live topic is pitching to investors, entrepreneurial mistakes. And we are joined by two very special guests. Our first guest on today's show is Sean Burke. Joining us today from Vancouver, British Columbia, he is praised for his leadership, his ability to motivate, and his phenomenal skill on the basketball court. Well. Sean is the Chief Operating Officer at Front Funder, a service designed to bridge the gap between investors and entrepreneurs. And here, live in studio, is Paul Whitney, co-founder of African Bronze Honey, a for-profit social enterprise dedicated to marketing organic African honey and honey products from 6,000 artisanal beekeepers. With his partner, Liz Connell, Paul won the 2016 Startup Canada Demo Day on the Hill, a pitch competition with over $10,000 in valued prizes. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us.
And to, sorry. Please.
Well, thank you for having us here.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure so far. To those of you tuning in, you can ask questions anytime using the hashtag StartupLive on Twitter or by commenting on the Facebook Live video, and we will be taking some questions from the audience throughout the actual broadcast. So, question one goes to Sean. Sean, and first of all, in lovely British Columbia, is it nicer there than it is here? Because we had some ice. But really, how does Front Funder work? I want to know what a day in the life is for you as a Chief Operating Officer.
Yeah, so thanks, Brandon, for the question. I mean, hey, everybody. So, yeah, if you're tuning in from Vancouver, you'd know it's more like
so
a little
those
bit
know,
like...
we cannot hear Sean
Correct.
in the host.
Yeah. We know you're saying wonderful things, but we can't hear them. Yeah. So we're having some technical difficulties,
Sean.
I
think we can get you now, Sean. Go.
Is that better now?
No,
still not.
We still can't hear you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Maybe while we figure that out, we can
Why don't
chat
we?
with Paul?
Yeah, we're going to pause with you.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Sean. I'll get you back to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, well, I guess we could do the same question for you, Paul. What is a day in the life of running your business? Can you walk us through? There's many challenges, I'm sure.
I don't think that there are 2 days in a row that are the same, and we are now 4 years in on a startup, and it is not any different than the first day we started, where we were breaking new ground all the time. We're certainly, like most companies, there's repetitious things that have to be done every day, and we have lunch breaks like everybody else. But what comes up minute by minute, it's still a war room. That's how we operate. We tend to be like a lot of smaller businesses, startups. We tend to deal with issues as they come up.
Okay.
So we are storytellers and problem solvers. as opposed to administrators. And I think that that's where startups, I think we all relate to each other on that basis, is we tend to be a little bit of everything every day.
Well, and you're clearly a great pitcher, because in terms of pitching techniques, because you won Startup Canada Day on the Hill. So can you tell us why you stood out and what are your special pitching techniques for those watching and they're looking for some useful tips and tricks to apply?
Okay, first of all, be prepared. That's really important, because the pitch happened in a very large room, and although we understood our story incredibly well, the nerves of the day, the excitement, the fact that there were, 1,000 people in the room and it was now suddenly being broadcast live, instead of describing our project in the heart of a forest in Africa, at the Zambezi River, I said the Amazon River. So, and nobody noticed that I was talking about a river in South America as opposed to Africa. So the reality is, about a pitch, go for it. And be passionate. And I think one of the things that Liz and I really try to communicate is to everyone that works for us, we're all storytellers. Don't use a script. Know what you're talking about and connect yourself, connect your heart and soul to the story. Why is it you personally are passionately involved in it? And that's how you're going to relate to your customers, to your potential investors, to partners, to all the service providers around you, is by your passion and your knowledge on the subject, your ability to communicate your ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very valuable feedback for sure. I mean, as a investor myself, when people can't connect to their own story or tell me where it kind of came from and help me understand a problem area, it's really difficult for us to get behind it. It can be the coolest piece of technology or, the coolest, I guess, community of artisanal beekeepers in this case, but it doesn't quite matter as much if I don't resonate with the problem. So.
It's interesting you say that, because I listened to Robert from Dragon's Den. I read a piece about it the other day, and he said they don't really invest in products as much as they invest in the entrepreneur, the passion behind it, because ultimately it's your drive and motivation that keeps going. It is the business, because I think I've done this most of my life, this type of entrepreneurial activities, and the reality is if you give up, the product is gone to a great degree, because it takes many, many years to build a company that is sustainable on its own.
Right.
It's not a month or even a year or two. Yeah. It's at least 5 years.
Oh yeah,
and more like 10. Before you really.
There's always the running joke of the 10-year overnight success, right? So I think I can hear Sean talking to me, so I'm going to ask him a question. Hey, Sean, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can. I've got a question for you, and I've said it before.
He's going back.
How does Front Funder work, my friend? And what's a day in the life for you as a COO?
Awesome. Yeah, well, Front Funder is a relatively new company ourselves. We've been live now for about 1.5 years. And what we do is we're a platform that connects investors with entrepreneurs and earlier stage companies. So we've taken the idea, as you guys have been talking about Dragon's Den, and really what we've done is put that online and now allow any Canadian across Canada, regardless of their wealth status, to be able to invest in these earlier stage private companies online through our platform.
Very interesting. So you let any company, essentially you basically brought Dragon's Den online and in this more unique method of allowing people to present and also invest?
Exactly. So, I mean, the way that earlier stage companies would traditionally go out and get that capital to raise that capital for their business has been through accredited investors, angel investors. And so what we've done is we've made the platform available and democratized the angel investing so that the rest of Canada could be an angel investor and invest in as low as $100 in these early stage private companies.
So what would be the limits or prerequisites that a startup needs to fulfill before working with Front Funder?
So there's quite a few, actually. And I think the biggest thing to understand is that given the fact that it is a highly regulated environment that we're operating in, we have to do quite a bit of due diligence on the companies as well that's coming onto the platform. No different than a traditional investor would want to do that due diligence. So we work with companies to make sure that they are fully compliant from a due diligence standpoint, that they have, as you guys mentioned earlier, a solid team with the right experience and the abilities to execute on their business plans or the use of proceeds that they would ultimately raise through a campaign. And in doing so, we try to make the products or work with companies that have either products or services that are very easy to understand and that have a good customer following. They might already have a product and it's not just an idea anymore, but they're actually starting to produce.
Very interesting. And with that, does that mean that you work around some of the Canadian laws by rolling all those dollars into one venture investment, so it comes from one institutional VC so that you can avoid accreditation? Or are you also taking advantage of the new accreditation changes in the United States?
Yeah, so what's really great right now in terms of a fintech company and RegTech from that perspective, we actually work with the existing securities laws that are in place. And historically, there has been the opportunity for companies to reach out to what we call retail investors. And those retail investors, which are typically your average Canadian, what we've done is through the use of technology and the algorithms that our platform has, we basically have designed an interface that's extremely user-friendly. So you really just have to answer a couple of questions as you're going through the process, and that our backend and our platform takes care of all the sophisticated rules that allows any investor to invest.
Very cool. Well, thank you for those details. The next question I have kind of goes to both of you, so I will probably get Paul to answer first here in the studio. But what are some of the most memorable mistakes, I like these questions, that you've witnessed from companies pitching to investors? And how can entrepreneurs avoid making some of those mistakes?
Oh, okay. So I've got to see. I guess it's not by accident that I got invited here to sort of talk about
this is a setup,
how to not do.
This is totally a setup.
Pitch. So we went to a pitch to a group. They were great people. But we went to pitch a group that we thought was pretty much a slam dunk, and we thought this is the right group. Everything, all the boxes, everything fit together. And we did a great pitch, and it was very passionate, and all of the details, and we hit all the buttons and filled all the boxes and the bells and the whistles, and it was great, and everybody loved the honey, and it was fantastic. And a week later, they said, we'll get back to you a week later, and I went back for the follow-up meeting, and their head of their committee sat there and said, yeah, it was an excellent pitch. You just didn't mention how you were actually going to make money. And
seems important.
Pretty important part to a pitch.
It's pretty essential. And as much as, as a social enterprise, and a lot of startups come with another vision other than just, returning a profit, those things are extremely valuable. But in all pitches, you've got to have the basic elements. How are you going to be sustainable? How are you going to keep the doors open? One of the ways, especially if you're in business, is to create wealth, to make a profit.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a very clear and direct and concise and quantifiable path to that, your investors are going to remain cautious.
Well, and you likely won't be in business for that long either.
Well, you may learn, as you go along.
Sure,
and
but you need to sustain your business.
You do. You absolutely do. But investors want to know how their investment's going to come out.
Of course.
Not the next investor that comes along. Because you can't say, well, we'll get to that point and then we'll get some more money.
Yeah.
No, they want to know how they're going to get their money out at when that, your period of time is done.
Yep.
So I think that some logical backing up a little bit and being passionate is very, very important, but a bit of, Mr. Spock in there with some logics is very, very valuable.
That is a great reference, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I would say for people listening and watching that it's a key takeaway is the basics, to cover the basics, because sometimes when the nerves kick in, like you gave your example, 1,000 people or whatever during the pitch competition, sometimes you can forget some of those basics. So to make sure that those are drilled in and covered, if I'm hearing you correctly, that's pretty critical.
Well, actually, interestingly enough, in the Startup Canada pitch, we were really talking about global, how you can go global. So that was our pitch. It wasn't as much as how we were going to make money in that pitch. That one we nailed. We nailed that perfectly because we weren't actually pitching for investment. We were pitching to talk about going global. So we talked about the global aspects, and that one of their sponsors for that, it was UPS Canada, and we very much have made a strong relationship out of that pitch, because instead of investment, they have brought their bench strength of delivering our goods carbon neutral around the world.
Amazing.
So our pitch was very focused about global delivery, the supply chain around the world, working with a large company like that. So I think that we felt that was focused, other not so much. So,
But even adding on to that, if I may, Paul, I think that another key takeaway would be to adjust your pitch for who you're pitching to. I know it's obvious, but it still is important to say one pitch will not work for every scenario.
Yeah. And to be fair, nothing's obvious these days. Like first principles thinking is like one of the hardest skill sets to find in most people. Just to turn that question back to you as well, Sean, and to refresh it, what were some of the most memorable mistakes you've witnessed in some people pitching? And obviously you get that opportunity at Front Funder. And how can entrepreneurs avoid making those mistakes?
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things with us being at Front Funder is we still are a relatively earlier stage company ourselves. And we actually did a round, a fundraising round of about $750,000 on our own platform, which we just recently closed. So we did get the experience of going through our own platform and understanding, what were the areas that we had room for improvement. But I got to go back to the same thing that Janice just mentioned, and that's to understand your audience. For us, we have 3 separate pitches that we like to give. One is to an investor, one is to a customer, and then one is to a partner. So for us, it's really trying to put ourselves in the shoes of those people who we're pitching to and understand what are their concerns, what are they trying to understand, and how can we deliver it in the most succinct manner possible, or succinct manner that we can to them. And then the other thing is answering their questions. So typically when we're witnessing a lot of pitches, and we have those kind of core elements that we're looking to cover off, a lot of the times, Paul mentioned, entrepreneurs get caught up in trying to tell their story when really the question could be quite simple to answer. So definitely making sure that you cover off the question. So for me, speaking and taking a word of my own advice, I don't really have like a specific memorable answer to that one, other than the fact that I'd say the common kind of themes that come through is something just to be aware of when you're making your pitch.
Very cool. Definitely appreciate it. I'll take this opportunity to slightly give one more example of a mess up, and I did it myself. If you're going into investor presentations and everything like that, I made the mistake of I had to fly to LA to meet with a bunch of investors, but I was only there for 24 hours. So I thought it was a really great idea to put them all in one room, because they suggested they're all friends. I mean, almost all investors know each other, which, by the way, all investors know each other. So don't lie to one investor. We know. So just a heads up, that's one tip. The other one was they said, well, we all know each other. Let's sit in one room. We'll just do this one pitch. We'll all ask our questions, and then you can easily catch your flight to San Francisco. As I was bouncing in, I'm like, this makes sense. As soon as one investor starts to go in on you on some aspect of your business that's wrong, you just watch the other 7 investors in the room go, yeah, I'm with him. Like that's
something I hadn't even thought of.
Exactly.
Maybe, right?
So I think I successfully managed to get 8 no's by messing that one up.
Very effective and fast.
Oh,
right?
it was fast. It was fast. I mean, one of them was really bullish. He was the one who flew me down in one. Anyway, but it was I would recommend to those in the audience, try not to pitch them all in the same room, because you'll learn from one of them. You can develop your skills, and I mean, every investor is open to you coming back, so do that as well. But try to avoid putting them all in one room.
And thinking about that too, just this idea of getting a sense of in the room who might have the most sway. Sometimes you don't know that, but if you're doing your research, so you said the one kind of led, everybody followed. So kind of maybe tailoring some of your answers or your thinking, knowing, again, this goes back to what Sean was saying too, about who's in the room or what the pitch is. So perhaps then we could cover and jump in too, Brandon, because you have lots of expertise, fundamental elements of a perfect pitch. So Paul, in your view, what do you think? And then we'll hear from Sean and Brandon.
Perfect pitch?
Or the fundamentals anyways. What are the fundamentals in your view? I mean, yes, the passion piece you talked about and tailoring it, but is there anything else in your view that's critical to making a pitch perfect?
I think it's not even just for pitch, it's about everything in life. Be brief. Get to the point. You should be able to sum up what you have to say in one sentence. In other words, you should be able to sum up what your message is in a very short story. All of those years of thinking and planning and all the numbers and all the things, the trips you took, all of that has to be condensed. In fact, I ask everyone in our company, when I go around the jobs, I say, what is your job? And they'll say, well, I get up every day and I come. No. In one word.
Wow.
What do you do? What's your job?
Okay.
And they don't have the answer. But I say, my next question is, give it to me in a sentence, what you do in one
So tweet-worthy.
Tweet-worthy. It
drill it down.
Drill it down, forces you to focus, because that investor is going to know, or it doesn't matter who you're talking to, they're going to know very quickly about whether they want to continue and how they want to continue with you. And if you don't upset people, that's a good thing.
Also true. So this is just, it's too easy of an opportunity. What's the one sentence pitch for your company?
Yeah, there we go.
Us, we market and sell tropical forest honey on behalf of 10,000 beekeepers in Africa.
It's pretty good.
There it
it's
is.
Pretty good. And it's funny because that is always the hardest thing to do. You're right. It takes the longest time to get to the shortest statement.
Yeah.
So
and he did it right on the spot.
Exactly. Live and in charge. Sean, I'll turn it to you. What's what's the fundamentals of a perfect pitch?
Yeah, so I think I'll focus a little more maybe on some of the fundamentals. I mean, the first thing is you got to be able to communicate what the problem is and how you're going to solve that problem. If you can't do that, I mean, at the end of the day, that's your business idea. That's why you exist, and that's really what the idea behind the investors investing in. Other things would typically be the market size. So depending on the vertical, depending on the industry that the company is operating in, you want to know and have an understanding of where could the potential of this investment go. And typically, the higher the risk of an investment, the higher the return that investor is looking for. So they need to understand what's the potential market opportunity for this type of investment. Then you also got to demonstrate, what's the revenue and the monetization strategy. So we talked briefly about this, and Paul alluded to it, but making sure that you understand how are you going to be making money if you're a traditional brick and mortar, and understanding the cash flows that would be associated with that business and how you can generate that revenue to sustain and ultimately get a return for your investors. Or if you're more of like an app or something that you're looking to monetize based on users, understanding the key metrics that it's going to take in terms of having that success. And then, typically the team, everybody wants to know who's the team, who are the people behind it. And lastly, what are you going to use and two more. What are you going to use those proceeds for? So when you are taking that investment, how are those proceeds going to be used to get you to your next milestones, to achieve your goals, and then ultimately use those goals and metrics as ways to raise more capital, or if your business is starting to generate cash flow, pay down whatever that investment is. And then finally, what's the exit strategy? So how are these investors going to get out? How are they going to make money? So I think if you cover off of those key pieces, those are kind of the core elements. And I'm sure there's tons of books and guides as well too that people would have additional kind of thoughts on this.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Sean. To add my very short couple cents, I'm with you. I'm also with you. I know you're having a hard time hearing Sean, so I'm sorry if you missed some of that. But the couple things I'll say is, one, to those watching in the audience who want to prepare a better pitch deck or something like that, DocuSend created and analyzed all the pitch decks that were sent around, and they basically boiled it down to Sequoia Capital's 10-slide pitch deck. They reorganized it based on the data they saw of people reading pitch decks. It gives you the best template I think I've seen, so start there. For me, when you're talking to me as a venture capitalist, I'm in agreement with all of the things that have been said, so I usually want the 10 slides. I don't want it to take very long because most of it is analyzing, as you mentioned earlier, Paul, who you are in your company and yourself. But the big things are go-to-market strategy. Too few people have a good understanding as to whether or not they can actually get their product in front of the people that they need to. A lot of people come up with great ideas, but it's not sellable, or it's not going to scale, or it can't really go anywhere, or they don't know who to go talk to. The other piece is that moment where you talk about problem area and solution area. That's really great and super critical, yes, because you have to be able to paint why this is a real problem in the world. But the other component that comes out of that is your unique insight. So anytime you talk to me about a company, statistically speaking, I've talked to probably 10 companies that do the same thing that you're doing. But they all do it differently. So one says I go in like through the doctor route, or one says I go in through the ETL layer route, or they all have a different kind of approach to it. And that's what I kind of classify as your unique insight. So it's, if you can tell that to me, like why you think this is the way to do it, that's probably going to make your pitch resonate more with me, and also help me understand how you grow and what makes you kind of special, and like why you're probably going to win. That's kind of.
I would add size of opportunity too.
Of course, yes.
You know, I hear a lot of people talk about, they get excited about something that's, the Godzilla idea,
right.
Sort of, storming into town and, taking, But I think there's a lot to be said, and I know Sean covered this, but I'll say also, I think, the team is everything, right? Like, do you believe that regardless of the monster idea, and everything else, is this the group that can actually see it through?
Yeah.
Because you have to put so much faith in those people. So, so I think that's a critical piece too. People.
I'm hopeful that somewhere in here we get to play the game of like, what was your grittiest moment? But if not, I'm bringing that question up later. So I'll turn it to you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So I think this is also really helpful for people watching and listening. What can entrepreneurs expect of an investor? Like, what are they going to ask them in their pitch? I know we covered some of that, but what are, you probably have a go-to question. Do you? Like one that, I knew it.
Yeah.
Say it.
Like, no, I'm not answering this.
No. Okay, all right, go ahead, Paul. Or to flip it to you, what has been either unusual or a consistent question that you've heard from investors?
Well, the consistent question, I think, as I hear, is how will this make money? I think that's and that's kind of a given. But I want to turn this around on you a little bit, because I actually have a question I ask back to investors. Because I ask them, what role are they willing to play in the business that we're doing? Because for us, it is not just about passion. We want people to fundamentally understand what we're trying to do. We are a B Corp. We're a benefit corporation. We are a social enterprise, sure, but we are organic. We're fair trade. We work on a very unique basis, and we're breaking a lot of new ground. So we want our investors to be able, not necessarily share in all the values, but to understand that there is an economic wealth in that, and we're building a new paradigm. So whereas a lot of investors come with intentions of trying to get at the root and core of the business, we actually spend a lot of time trying to educate them on how there is a new paradigm that's developing in business, and social enterprise is part of that. So I've nicely skirted answering your question by turning it back to the investors.
No, but this is actually really critical, because you said they don't have to share your values, but typically arrangements work best when there is alignment of values and that understanding. So if they're not in step with you, then you may not have the problem today, but you can pretty much predict a few days down or months down the road, there's going to be a problem.
Well, we actually had a situation where we had an offer, and it was it was a real tough, here, take it or leave it kind of thing, and we want this, and we just said,
not going to work.
Thank you, but you know what? I don't think we can handle that.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. So for us, I like to get to know the people and see if we're going to work together, because all of these things are long-term commitments, and you're going to spend not 8 hours a day, but you're going to spend day in and day out talking to these people, answering questions, reassuring them, giving them answers and solutions.
We get scared a lot.
Yeah.
We get scared.
Yeah.
So.
And understandable, it's your money, and people have worked hard to create that wealth, and they want to hold on to it. So, I think being able to use that question and answer to fulfill the needs of your investor, I think that's the way I would answer that.
I think it's strong. That's great.
Give them some solid ground to stand on.
Because everybody can't be your dream investor, right? I mean, on both sides of the table, right? There's some people that would say, that's not for me. But similarly, like the example you gave, that's not going to be an investor that you want either.
Beware of just taking money. It's not in your best interest just to have money. You really have to do something very unique with it, and you have to produce real return in wealth, but real return in growth of your company, so that you're moving forward. You're moving everyone forward, your product forward, your customers forward.
So Brandon's going to tell us his question, but first we'll hear from Sean to know what he thinks entrepreneurs can expect from an investor. What types of questions in their pitch?
Yeah, just to finish up kind of Paul's comment there, I think at Front Funder, it's unique in that we take on tons of investors in earlier stage companies, and that's not the norm. Historically, it's been, you found that one or two, possible syndication of maybe 10 or 15 angel investors. But at Front Funder, we take on hundreds of investors for these companies. Yeah. So for us, we really try to understand what's the objective of the fundraise. So part of coming on Front Funder is that you get the exposure and the opportunity to have your customers, your evangelists, become investors in your company and have an aligned interest, so that as the company succeeds, they'll be your best salespeople and go out there and talk about your product and promote your product. So you're using the crowd essentially as your best salespeople who are also investors. However, on the other side, we also understand that there's benefits from having a lead angel investor or a lead venture capital firm, and they're going to bring a different set of skill set. So what we try to do is work to identify and find and work with the companies to understand what are their objectives and how can the different types of investors bring that added value to them. And on that note, I know that what a lot of people are thinking of is, if you have thousands or hundreds of shareholders, well, isn't that going to be a mess on your cap table? And how does the governance work from that perspective? So what we've also designed is a mechanism that essentially, and this goes back to Brandon's point, pools these shareholders so that they're directly investing in the company and they do sit on your cap table. But from a government standpoint, the voting rights and the governance of the company is essentially assigned to an existing shareholder. Typically, it's the founder, and they essentially vote and take care of the governance matters on behalf of those shareholders. So that's what we do to try to understand who those investors are and how they can benefit.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Okay, now we want to hear what's the one question Brandon asked every time. I feel like, we're getting right to the heart of things now.
I'm nervous because I feel like you guys have worked this up. It's not that special. It's not that impressive. Like, geez.
You got a go-to question. We want to know it.
All right, fine. So first of all, I just want to recognize the point from Sean. Like, it's a great point, and at some point, you and I will have to talk about how you manage like your investor communications with this many people. Because in one of my old companies, I had 8 investors, angel investors, and they're great people, angel investors. I love them, and everyone's saying the right things, right? Like, your investor should be pretty much aligned with your company's goals and with you, and they should be the first person you call when things go wrong.
Yeah.
They really should be. You shouldn't be avoiding them. But the fear is they would sometimes just call me, and it got to the point where sometimes I was like, "It's really great to hear from you, Rob, but like, I got to work. So can you stop asking me questions? Like, so I wonder what it would be like if I had 120 or something that are my best customers. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
So I'll give you the opportunity to respond to that at some point. So sorry, you might have to write it down. My question, here we go. I've tried to avoid it. I asked what the most interesting thing that they've done in the last 48 hours was. And it can't be work.
And because at my stage, I do pre-seed to seed stage deals. We could write up to $500,000. So we do Series A as well. But generally, I'm looking at like really early companies. So pre-seed is it's a new word for small check. And when I'm doing that kind of deal, I really care about the team, and everyone keeps saying the team, but like really care about the team, because sometimes they have like a spreadsheet and they've been making phone calls, and that's how they got sales and traction. There's no product yet, and we actually help them build the product as well. So when I talk to somebody, like, I'm not looking anymore for a founder who says, "Oh, I work 20-hour days." I'm going to tell you that that's a really bad idea and really bad for your health, and you're the single point of failure for this company. Right.
So I want you to be working, a good amount, maybe 10 hours a day or whatever, but like, getting it done and efficient. But I also want to know, like, do you play World of Warcraft on the side? Are you passionate about something? Do you care? Like I want to know what else you've done. So some people say, "Oh yeah, I went hella skiing over the weekend." I'm like, "That's cool." Like, "Oh, I'm like, ranked for judo world championships." You're like, "You got grit." Like, you discover some interesting piece of someone that they can't quite polish, and usually the question sets people a little off balance, because they have to think, well, what did I do in the last 48 hours? So you get this moment where you actually see the truth of them, because a lot of people get too polished. Anyway.
So I got to ask the question, what did you do
there you go.
in the last 48 hours?
I shop vacked my apartment because a sprinkler malfunctioned and there was 9 inches of water on my hardwood floor. So it's been great, really. It's very interesting to learn about how hardwood bends with water, and then when you actually shop vac it bends the other way. So there's like this really careful balance to it. Yeah, so learning a lot about the physics of wood flooring. There you go.
So you will be able to write a report on this.
That's right.
It sounds a lot like work,
And
actually.
because I referenced it, I also got a new world record in World of Warcraft.
Excellent.
So hey, there we go.
There you go. All right. So
now, off this topic before I embarrass myself further.
But thank you for sharing that.
You're very welcome.
All of it.
Thank you for asking.
Because I actually think, because I like to do the takeaways, the practical things for people watching. So another thing would be to be okay with the unexpected in terms of questions. Like, that's your opportunity to shine really on like who you are as a person. So so that's your one question, but there may be others like that. But I think this is really helpful because it can, when you're pitching and you said the polished piece and you've memorized it and you're going through, and then somebody asks you this question, it's like, So, knowing that kind of a question is okay and is likely to come when you, in an unexpected way, is also seen as a really valuable answer, like
it's half the game. I mean, I've asked someone before. They had a team of 10 and they're doing pretty well, and I just said, "Why don't you have a female team member yet?" And I just watched them shake and like vibrate. It was pretty funny. And
Thank you for asking that.
They gave good. You're very welcome. It's very important to me. But it was more of a I find this interesting because there's so many people you could hire, and it turned into a great conversation in reality where they said, "Well, I hired my friends that I've worked with, and I just happen to know these." And I was like, "Well, you should try a little harder." But anyway,
and the case for diversity is already made for business. Like you're gonna get to better places with a diverse team.
Well, also the reality is business is people. It's about people, and the fact that you happened. You didn't ask me, and you should have asked me what I did. So I'm learning to make turkey calls. To call wild turkeys, okay? So I'm learning because I love outdoors, and I just thought, okay, this is $10, and is completely to do with nothing in business. So I didn't bring my turkey call, so unfortunately, but I can sort of do that.
I was gonna say, can I do that? I don't know.
It's totally a different focus, and when you tell people that, they find it funny. They find the guy is nuts. But it is totally, it's for me, it takes my mind somewhere other than business because we can all get so obsessive. And the reality is, people say, oh yeah, you did that. Well, I actually, and then you have a relationship.
Oh, it's awesome.
And that's how business is really, truly done. That's how we get to know
The
each
authentic
other.
discussion.
So I think your question is absolutely right on. I think
But now we
great.
need to know from
Well, we're
Sean,
doing it to everybody.
right? Yeah,
You're
Sean.
coming up
That's
with this
fine.
answer.
I'll do mine. But
the
what's
other
Sean?
side of this is
I want to know
I
Sean's answer.
secretly gave away like the way that I meet everybody. Every time I go to a startup pitch event, I ask people this question, and they like immediately want to be my friend after for some reason. I'm just
Because
like,
you're asking a caring
it's like
question.
a really good question.
It's a great question.
I gave away my secret.
Yeah.
All right, Sean, it's on
Now
you.
we're going to use
Turkey
it,
call,
too.
That's my question.
Yeah, I'll have to say it back to you in case you can't hear him. But
Yeah.
Sean, what is the most interesting thing you've done in the last 48 hours? Not working.
Yeah, I wish it was as exciting as Paul's, but for me, I've just recently got into Game of Thrones. So
Game of Thrones.
yeah, I'm on season 3, so hopefully no spoilers out there. But it's it kind of consumes my free time, and other than that, kickboxing.
Kickboxing, sweet.
Yeah, I've been getting into that, and a little too much actually. I threw out my back in the last class.
He
So.
threw out his back, he said.
Kickboxing. Man, head kicks are hard, okay? I did Muay Thai for a little bit, so
Oh, boy.
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Well, mine is very straightforward. I swim laps.
Oh, cool. Swim laps.
Swim laps.
Nice. Is that like in like a Olympic-sized regulation pool or like
It's,
whatever kind
it's
of thing? Or?
at the Chateau Laurier here in Ottawa,
cool.
and they have a saltwater pool. It's old,
Nice.
like from the 1920s, and it's got the little lines for laps, and everybody that goes there just gets in the pool and swims laps.
You hit it.
It's very,
great.
I used to be a lifeguard,
Okay.
so I'm used to swimming laps, so I find it a very relaxing form of exercise, but also great thinking time.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. That's why I jog, basically.
Yeah,
It's mine.
yeah. Well, I have a bum foot right now, so I'm not running.
Fair enough.
So
Swimming's
I'm
great.
extra swimming. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
That's
it's
very cool.
But I'm kind of fascinated with the turkey calls. So.
Turkey calls, they're a thing.
You can turkey call at the Chateau Laurier. I'm sure they would have no trouble in a 4-star or 5-star Fairmont hotel.
There's no
They
problem
would
with
love
that.
that.
They
So,
would.
especially in
Yeah.
the
Just do it every time you come
Yeah.
up for air on the front row. There you go.
Well, we
Okay, I'm gonna
probably
try
should
to
move
get this
on.
back to useful,
Should we move on to maybe our question and answer from our listeners?
Yeah,
What do
probably.
you
That's
say?
a great idea, actually.
Yeah.
Forget the script.
Yeah. How about that?
Okay.
So if anybody is interested, it's #StartupLive in your question if you want to join in on the action. But in the meantime, why don't we continue with a couple of other questions?
Yeah, I like this last one.
Go
I like
ahead.
it, so I'm going to dig into it
Yeah.
if that's all right
All
with
right.
you. All right. We were going into this. So finding the right investor is a lot like finding the right customer. You have to know your audience. Are different investors looking for different things? And how does an entrepreneur find the right investors for their company? So we kind of played into that. So I just wanted to actually get the question out there.
Well, I'm going to answer this in a different way. It's a great question, but we asked ourselves that. What kind of investor are we looking for? In the end, what we decided for our company, that we actually didn't want investors that were necessarily bringing money. We wanted investors that could bring us goods and services and deals and strategic partnerships. That those were the kind of investors. And so we broadened the term of what an investor is. Some of them bring money to as part of that, as a combination of what they're bringing. But we found out in the end that what brought us incredible bench strength was the ability to partner with companies that were already in related fields or related areas and wanted to partner with our products and partner with our story. So they were already qualified because they were doing similar kind of work. We didn't have to explain the social enterprise.
Yeah.
They were already
on
there.
board, yeah, which is so much easier, isn't it?
Yeah.
Makes me think of SheEO, if anybody's
yes,
familiar
yes,
with that.
I
So
know,
Becky
yes,
Saunders, so
yes.
I'm an activator. And for those of you that may not be aware, it's essentially women are asked to give $1,000 and it's give, so no tax receipts. So give the money and it goes towards, it forms a pool and then goes towards funding women-led companies here in Canada, but now it's actually spread outside of Canada. It's really igniting. But the reason why I mention it is it's has a lot of alignment in the sense that when you become an activator, which really is, and you're activated by donating your money, then you will get emails from the companies that we have funded who will then say, I'm looking for help with this, that, and the other. So it could be, I'm trying to break into this market. Who has help there? Those kind of questions. So direct. So it's, this amazing engaged group that's basically part of your network and who are very deeply committed to seeing you win. So I think that's just a wonderful way forward and a great model for others to, consider. And I love this idea that when you're thinking strategically about what an investor is, it's somebody who believes in your company and wants to help you grow.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Chio because Abigail Slater, we talked to her some time ago. She's involved with that organization. And out of that connection with her sister, who was in business, in working with Whole Foods, we had a relationship with Whole Foods. It led, and they
how
are
these
all,
things happen. Yeah, it's amazing.
Interconnected, and people
the conversations.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so somebody says, well, I can't really help you with that, but if you look there, here's a phone number. I'm going to make an introduction.
I love that.
And I think that is that's what your stock and trade is people in the end and making those connections.
Yeah. And Sean, do you have some thoughts on that as well, or the whole idea around the investors and alignment and
I think one of the things we always ask every investor at the end of the investment process online is, why did you invest in the companies? What was your number one reason? And 80% of the investors that are going through our platform are investing because they believe in the product or they believe in the idea. So a similar, sentiment to what Kickstarter does, but instead now these people who believe in the product and in the company are able to actually have a financial return if the company goes on to be successful. And part of that is the notion that at Front Funder we really do believe in challenging the status quo. And one of our champions, Jill Earthy, is very influential when it comes to female funding. So with our last round, we actually saw the statistics significantly increase based on the number of women investors investing in the Front Funder campaign, which we saw 30% of all investors were female investors.
Very cool.
That's great.
Nice. That's fantastic. I'm just going to check in if we had any questions on Facebook Live. Okay, cool. Well then, I've got more where that came from. We're going through an interesting little phase here. So the next question, of course, that is probably on most people's minds when it comes to pitching investors as well, is you both work internationally right now. And I'm referring to Sean and Paul. How is pitching for investment different around the world?
Wow. That's a big question. So it's not
Pandora's box. Hello.
It's not just pitching for investment. It's all the relationships you have, because as to us, everyone is an investor. So we today, in the last 3 days, I've been dealing with my partner in Zambia, in Africa, who works in a forest where there's no communication. I've been talking to a Canadian, but who has a very large agro-business in Mexico and also in South Africa. So the reality is pitching to them all. The hardest part is getting their attention. Because the people you're dealing with, including investors and whether they're here, but they're in another planet. They're on another world. They have their own issues. I'm talking to, just as a for instance, although it never came up in the discussion, I'm talking to somebody who has a very large business and a successful business in Mexico. And we didn't mention the President of the United States, but it's got to be an issue in that country, a massive issue about trade. So one of the things that's difficult all the time is understanding the things that they are dealing with. And my friend Dan, who has this business in a forest in Africa, I really have no understanding of what it's like to do business in a place that has no roads and no cell phones and no infrastructure. So, and he deals with that every day. That's his business and
his world.
And sometimes because I'm used to just picking up the phone or sending an email and, hey, I didn't hear back in 15 minutes. I ordered something and I want it now. What is my service, customer service? And Dan will, I'll say, Dan, I haven't heard from you in like 24 hours, and he'll go, Well, I was standing in a forest up a tree so I could get cell phone reception, and I was attacked by killer bees, or what,
Yeah, exactly.
Things are happening there that we don't really comprehend the pressures, and we in this country we lead a very a much less complicated life than many other countries in the world. So the issues that they're dealing with are often beyond what we can understand. So I guess I've learned to be a little more, to listen better. I've learned to listen to what they need. What are they, when they're asking questions, why are they asking it? What is the answer that they need? What's the question they really need answered? So listen. That's I think we listen to what your investors are asking.
I think that's really critical even for the bigger conversation around understanding what you're actually hearing from your customers too. Like listening, because sometimes we're so certain that we have the answer or we know the way the business should be, and yet we're getting this valuable feedback if we choose to listen. It's actually there. I mean, again, you got to ask good questions too, but more importantly, I think you have to listen to what you're actually hearing, because it can be so valuable for shaping outcomes with your business.
Well, if you're talking about an investor that's across in another country, they don't have the legal recourse or whatever or control. In Canada, we're all under the Court of Canada or whatever. So if there's a problem, it can be dealt with, or arbitration or whatever might come up. But if somebody's in another country, in another legal jurisdiction, there's no world small claims court, So they want to know, how are we going to deal with these issues if they come up? How do we resolve things? How do we make sure we don't have problems? And so you have to think a much larger. You've got to really think outside the box.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to those viewing, again, like trying to help with pitching investors, that's an excellent point. I mean, I have the pet peeve in general in life, I would say, but like, if you take your phone out while we're having a lunch, like I'm feeling a little weird unless you've prefaced something with me. Like I have one important phone call that may come in, so it's going to ring and stuff like that. But the biggest thing is listening skills are so difficult. Getting your attention back is so difficult. It's heightened by the heightened increase in number of blog posts of people writing about it. But sometimes the way that I'm asking questions of people is I am trying to draw something out of them. It's like I like the person, I like the team, I like the deal, but there's something that's not quite there. And if I kind of say it directly, it's not really going to work. So, listen. But you'll notice as someone's pitched and pitched and pitched more, like when they're at like pitch number 100, like they can't see it anymore. As soon as I'm like, yes, but what about go to, and they're like, oh, well, yes, and then just like jump in. You're like, well, you could have waited until I finished my question, but hey, and then it starts to, anyway, it's all about that building.
And I would add to that, truly good listening skills are a competitive advantage.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have all of these people, if I use your example of these amazing resources right around the world, when you're listening carefully to what they're telling you, feedback on your product or what's happening or pricing or whatever, this is huge. But you have to be open and receptive to hear it and then take it away and think about it in a meaningful way.
And operating in the pre-seed stage like we do at our firm, most of the time the traction you prove to me is just the conversations you've had with customers.
Yes.
So they're not saying like I've got 10,000 monthly recurring revenue or anything. They're like I've got 10 customers who love me, and here's all the conversations I've had with them, like transact like everything we've ever talked about. And I'm like, oh, you pay attention to your customers, you're in a good place. Like keep doing that. Like yay. And sorry, I'll let you chat there, Sean.
Yeah. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, the only thing I was going to add really is speaking the language of the. Yeah, and this is more, I mean, philosophically, you have an opportunity to basically go in and pitch an investor, especially if you're going down to the US, and I'll just use that as an example. Well, first of all, if you actually get on a plane, like Brandon, you mentioned when you flew to LA at the top of the hour, well, that physical connection is going to mean a lot more than just having something virtually over the computer or over the phone. So that's the first thing is if you can be in front of somebody face to face, that's definitely much more preferable if you have the financial resources to get there. And then the second piece to that is doing your homework going into it. So what I mean by speaking your language is if you know that an investor is more sophisticated in a certain area, well, speak to them with the same level of sophistication. But if that investor is, excited about the idea and then doesn't really understand the intricacies or the details, well, then don't go into those details. And speak to the level of your audience to make sure that they can consume and get the information that they need to be able to make that adequate investment decision.
Yeah, no, very true. I'm sure we've all been in this situation before, but I've had salespeople specifically, but I have had startups do this as well, but sell their way out of a deal. It's like like we had a 3-minute conversation. I'm like, oh, I'm in. And then they kept talking.
Yes.
And then like 10 minutes later, I'm like, I'm not in.
Yeah.
Like, what are you, why'd you
That
tell
whole
me
like selling it and then they bought it back.
Well, exactly.
Right?
I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I don't want it
Or
anymore.
when people try to do reduction to the ridiculous with me, I hate that sales tactic.
Less
than a
more.
coffee a day.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very good.
So I think we should probably wrap up.
Oh man,
I think
yeah, we've had a lot of fun.
We could continue, I think, for quite some time. And thank you to Sean and Paul. What a great conversation about pitching to investors, entrepreneurial mistakes. Did you want to remind everybody, Paul, about your website for those that want to learn more?
Sure, absolutely. So you didn't ask me, by the way, what my job was. And I want everybody listening to think about this for yourself. If you're going to be out there and you're in business, think about what you're in charge, whatever job you have. What is your job in one word? My job as the managing director of AfricanBronzeHoney.com is storyteller. What's yours?
Perfect.
Perfect. And Sean, you want to give us your website?
Yeah, so for all the companies and people who are thinking of starting a business or looking for their next round of capital, I'd encourage you guys to come check out our website, www.frontfunder.com. And basically from there, we have a team that's dedicated to helping you understand your objectives and raise that next round of financing.
Very exciting. Thank you. So join us next Tuesday, February 14th, when we discuss digital adoption for startups with Edwin Ferdonzo, host of Startup Chats and head of marketing and growth for Slingshot, and Catherine Forrest, head of marketing and government relations at Startup Canada. This event is powered by Rogers Business. You can register for this event and more at startupcan.ca/events. Make sure you fill out the Canadian Entrepreneurship Census, as today is the last day, and you can do that by visiting Startup Census today.
Very cool.
Over to you, my pal, my co-host.
I was going to say, we got to get like cool pet names.
Yeah,
yeah, you can also stay informed of all the latest opportunities, announcements, and entrepreneur events by following Startup Canada on Twitter, liking them on Facebook, and following them on Instagram. A new hashtag, Startup Podcast, all one word, drops every Tuesday on iTunes. And Startup Canada Live is here on Periscope, Facebook Live, and event stream every Thursday from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And to everyone joining us today, the entrepreneurs, startup community leaders, broadcaster viewers, thank you for having us, and have an absolutely enterprising week.
And you can help us change the world by buying African bronze honey.
Last word, Paul.